Known to Victorians colloquially as hotels for the poor or doss houses, flop houses in the United States, common lodging houses were buildings in which either beds or rooms were rented. The closest comparison today being something like a modern hostel. But in the 19th century, there were dozens of beds crammed into a room, the worst of them coming with the noise of hacking coughs from fellow waifs and strays, and a foul stink from food and unwashed bodies. Found in slums, they had a terrible reputation for being filthy, often overcrowded, and a dangerous place to find yourself, the home of vice and crime. If you didn't lose your boots and clothes in the night, you might escape in the morning to earn a few pennies for the next. Their one redeeming feature was that they were cheap and served as a roof over the heads of the unemployed and those on meagre wages who had nowhere else to go but the streets or the workhouse. Lodging houses were an answer to overcrowding in towns and cities, of sorts, but they were generally converted from existing houses by unscrupulous private landlords, whose only concern was collecting money and not the standard of accommodation offered. In fact, to say there were any standards at all until the latter years of the Victorian era is a stretch of imagination. Towards the end of the century, philanthropic charities and the government recognised the appalling state of lodging houses and, with inspections, standards improved, some coming under the control of London County Council. The Parker Street accommodation, for example, was built as a model lodging house off Drury Lane in West London and designed to be clean and livable. Or, in other words, the exact opposite of the shocking accommodation the working class had had to suffer for decades. Today, we take a visit to some of these 19th century doss houses, both the better and the much, much worse, with an eye-opening account by a Victorian investigative journalist. As you enter, imagine what it would have been like for your senses to be hit by the stink from whatever was being cooked up by the dossers. And if not that, then the odour of much older food encrusted in the grime-covered walls and ceilings. Find out what the hungry and penniless ate, and what it was like to live in the despair of a doss house, a place where some men lived a more wretched existence than others, surviving off the scraps and charity of a fellow lodger who had perhaps gained a few hours' work that day. And by night you would fight to get some rest by avoiding brawls and the howls of drunks, perhaps sleeping with one eye open, to guard not only your boots, but your pan of food too, stashed under your bed lest they disappear in the darkness to a quick-fingered thief. Before we move on, if you're interested in history like this, and you want to find out more about what life was really like for people in the past, please consider subscribing for more content. If you'd like to support what we make for you, check out the description for links to ways you can help us to continue bringing the past alive. Wherever there are particularly mean streets in London, the signs of hotels for the poor hang high over the causeway. By day, mere bushes. By night, beacons for the guidance of wrecked humanity. Boys' lodging houses. Men's lodging houses. Single women's lodging houses, couples' lodging houses of the rural type, open to all comers, irrespective of age, sex or condition, are scattered all over the great city to the number of about 1,000, sometimes alone, sometimes in twos and threes, sometimes in groups of a dozen, but in general, whether solitary or clustered together, off the beaten track, in the heart of seething, sordid slums. The doss houses for men only are most numerous and, perhaps, most varied, ranging as they do from the dwelling, which is registered for only about half a dozen, to the barrack-like building in which some 600 weary heads are laid down nightly, and from the den reserved for thieves and other gamins to the admirably conducted hostels of the Salvation Army, Father J's institution in Shoreditch, the farmhouse in Suffolk, and the many homes for particular sections of the Dosser Army. For a typical lodging house for men, we cannot do better than go to the district of which Spitalfields Church is the centre. Dorset Street, with its squalid air, its groups of dossers scattered over the pavement, as well as Flower and Dean Street, of little better repute, and having the same characteristics in a minor degree, are almost under the shadow of that edifice. And, as to the time of our visit, let it be 8 o'clock in the evening. Here we are, then. There is no need to knock. The door is open. At 4 a.m. it swings back to let out the market porters and a whole posse of lodgers who carry under their arms the mark of their calling, a roll of newspapers, yesterday's returns. It closes about 1 in the morning, though belated dossers straggle in afterwards. Through the ever-open door, along the passage, a sharp turn to the right, and, phew! Never mind, it is only oil of sea rover which adheres to the doss house, as the rose to the broken vase. You may scrub, you may whitewash the place as you will, but the odour of bloater will cling to it still. Bloaters are smoked herrings, smoked without gutting, which gives a gamey flavour. They were popular to eat in the 19th century. This is the kitchen, the common room of the house, the loafing place of the idle, and the workshop of the industrious. Opposite us as we enter, taking up nearly 1/2 the length of the wall, and framed in dull, dead black, a huge coke fire glows and crackles, diffusing to the remotest corner an oppressive warmth. It burns like a sepulchral lamp, continuously from year's end to year's end. Above, a serried line of tin teapots, battered and stained with long use, and above that, again, the rules of the house, one of which stands out in aggressive capitals. No washing on Sunday, meaning that laundry work is, for purely social reasons, prohibited on the Sabbath. In the corner beyond the fireplace, a buxom female figure is eyeing the depleted collection of cracked crockery ranged on the shelves, her sleeves upturned over massive biceps. She is the deputy, the domestic ruler of about 200 men. Her office is, even in hotels of this class, open to both sexes, each of which has qualifications for it denied to the other. The woman's strong point is the celerity and dispatch she displays in carrying out certain very necessary operations connected with bed-making. Hence the comfort of a house where females are entrusted with that work. Man's superiority lies in quelling disturbances and chucking. Generally the male deputy is more or less of a bruiser, though it is a mistake for him to be an expert pugilist. Else his whole time will be divided in unequal proportions between fighting and lying in hospital. All the maces, the staff, in Dosserland will flock to vanquish or be vanquished. Distributed over the kitchen, 3 or 4 score men are having tea, or, as they would call the meal, supper, and a grim, picturesque assemblage they make. Yonder a seedy, frock-coated failure on whose black, glossy curls Time's hand has not yet been laid, is supping some bits of bread, manifestly leavings begged from a tea-shop, in a decoction made from a halfpenny tea and sugar mixed, his eyes wandering now and again to a pair of kippers, which a market porter tossed from a frying pan onto a plate a few minutes since. At his elbow, an old man, whose snowy beard is plainly, when viewed sideways, his shirt-front mouths a greasy ham bone like a decrepit dog. In front of the fire is another figure that arrests the roving eye. A pallid youth has his meal spread before him on an evening newspaper, which is his tablecloth. It consists of tea, bread, and margarine, and that delicacy of which the dosser never tires, the humble bloater. The cup which the youthful lodger has before him is an old jam-pot. His only article of cutlery is his pocket-knife, and he conveys the food to his mouth with nature's forks. Artificial ones are not provided, nor is it customary to supply either knives or spoons. Too portable. That is the explanation. And now mark the men with tea only before them. tea which represents the waste of the doss house table, since it has come from the abandoned pots of other and more fortunate lodgers. All have that haunting expression, that dull, despairing look in the eyes, which hunger and buffeting engender. Judged by even the low standard of the fourpenny hotel, they are wretched in the extreme, and in comparison with them, most of the other inmates of the kitchen are prosperous. Half their nights are spent in the street, considerably more than half their days in this common room, where they doze by the fire. Bull or milk teapots pick up odds and ends from the table, and, if happy chance serve, share the meals of acquaintances who may themselves, for aught they know, have to postpone the next morning's breakfast indefinitely. They live, in fact, largely on the charity of their own class. Dossers' dependents are certainly an unscheduled section of the community, but they exist in hundreds and constitute one of the many mysteries of London. Endless other phases of the underworld can be studied in the kitchen of the fourpenny hotel. The vagrant industries alone afford an unlimited field for investigation. Paper flowers, sandbags, toasting forks, miraculous corn cures, novelties of all kinds, such as the walnut thimble casemate, made before your eyes. Old, worthless seeds are converted in a twinkling into the sweet-scented lavender of commerce. A pennyworth of scent from the chemist's effects the transformation. You can watch the pavement artist doing all my own work by deputy, the begging letter writer studying his private directory and drafting a condensed tragedy on the back of a music hall handbill, the broken-down journalist racking his brain for ideas that obstinately refuse to come at his bidding, the old soldier, reduced, as Mulvaney used to say in another sense, but a corporal once, coaching a comrade in the art of cadging from officers of his former regiment. Occasionally, even a singing lesson may be witnessed in a kitchen. Not that griddlers practice their hymns in a doss house, people who cook with griddles over fires. They learn them at the ragged churches on Sunday. It is the waits who sometimes rehearse at home. Next, the sleeping chambers. It is midnight. The door at the foot of the stairs is locked, but for all that, many men are in bed. At intervals, the deputy has opened it, and taken from each lodger as he passed the numbered metal cheque given to him by the proprietor earlier in the evening as a voucher for his fourpence. Until the dosser is going to bed, he is not required to show if he has paid his lodging money. After a couple of yards up the staircase, and we reach the first landing, from which there are openings to the right and left, leading into small bedrooms, and those into other rooms, and so on till the stranger thinks he is rambling halfway up the street. Here, a number of small, domestic-like chambers occupy the upper part of the house. In others, the system is different, there being only 2 or 3 rooms, in which beds stretch away in a long line on each side of the door. This associated arrangement is in force at some houses, where 6pence per night is charged. But here is the first room. Bareness is its keynote. No curtains or blind to the window, no covering of any kind on the well-scrubbed floor, no pictures on the walls, which are unrelieved whitewash except for a county council notice, and a number at the head of each bed, corresponding to that of a room in a hotel. That notice sets forth for how many beds, 6, the apartment is registered, and exactly so many does it contain. One more, if discovered, and the inspector drops in occasionally about 2:30 in the morning, would subject the owner to a heavy penalty. On going higher, and seeing room after room of exactly the same character as the first, you discover that most beds in the house are occupied. From the foot of one a dark mass protrudes. A man has turned in without undressing. That is all. If the rule of the American hotel keeper, guests found in bed with their boots on will die that way, was suddenly enforced in common lodging houses, the rate of mortality among dossers would be appalling. Blacker still is an object under another bed. It is a saucepan containing the remains of a stew, the property of him who sleeps above it. The reason it is stored here is not obscure. Look at the waistcoats peeping out from under pillows, or turn down the coverlets on that empty bed and read the legend stamped boldly on the lower sheet. Stolen from. There is the clue. The prevalence of theft in these places, mean, paltry, contemptible theft, accounts for the presence of the saucepan under the bed. Many a man has woke up to find his boots gone, and occasionally a lodger is robbed of all his clothing, coat, waistcoat, trousers, shirt, everything, while he is asleep. Now there is a rush of feet on the stairs, a babble of voices rising higher and higher. The last train is coming up. The laggards who are always loath to leave the kitchen have been turned out. Soon the whole house will be silent, save for the chattering of two cronies who have tarried overlong at the Pig and Pen Wiper. Then there will be a howl from somebody whom they have wakened, and then, perhaps, a fight. Of exceptional doss-houses for men, there are many. A hurried survey of 2 or 3 will modify the impression that the typical fourpenny hotel has produced. First, Father J's Hospice in Shoreditch. Here we are in a different atmosphere. A light, well-appointed kitchen. Cubicles above, some of them very tastefully decorated by their occupants, and still higher the ordinary rooms, split up to a certain extent by fixed wooden screens, one of which is covered with brackets, busts, looking-glasses, pictures, and odds and ends innumerable, the property of the man whose bed is beneath. Such are the memories one carries away from the place. All is in striking contrast to the bareness and gloom of the typical East End doss-house. Secondly, the Salvation Army's institution at Paddington, mainly remarkable for its sleeping side. At night one of its rooms is an eye-opener. To right, to left, in front, beds, 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 in seemingly endless number. There is a whole acre of them, all tenanted as far as can be seen. 200 sleepers are contained in this one huge chamber, most of them men in fairly regular work, bricklayers, labourers, navvies, and the like. Ask such a man why he stops here rather than in private lodgings, and his reply is prompt and emphatic. "Oh, give me company," he says, and, indeed, that is the principal reason. It strikes some people as strange, but the same thing is met with in higher strata of life. Finally, there is the farmhouse in Suffolk, another very good specimen of the better class of doss-houses. It is one of the few establishments of its class where cooking by gas is practicable. Let us now visit a typical women's lodging house. Upstairs, it differs in no way from one for men. Downstairs, the kitchen, with its ruddy coke fire, its overpowering aroma of bloater, its heated atmosphere, as before. Never does it vary very much, though it is between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, a time when a house for men is almost deserted. The room is full of females, young and old, some eating, some talking, some at work. One is making paper flowers, another knitting, and a third mending a rent in her skirt. At the outset, the mixed and motley group stirs the imagination profoundly, and still more so when one comes to analyze it. How many of the women bear marks of brutality, swollen lips, cut cheeks, black eyes, and what tragedies has outraged nature written on some faces which have not been bashed lately? You can see faint traces of the finer feelings and aspirations in a mass of male wreckage, but here, if they survive at all, the dim light fails to reveal them. Study, for a moment, that group near the fire. A young woman with dishevelled hair and open bodice, she has apparently yet to make her toilet, is frying steak and onions. By her side, a companion equally untidy is also preparing a meal. Breakfast, maybe, despite the hour. She drops her halfpenny tea and sugar mixed into a pot, cautiously lets 2 eggs sink in on the heap, and then pours boiling water on the lot. This is a wrinkle in dosshouse cookery. The process saves time and trouble always, and in some establishments is compulsory, by reason of the absence of small saucepans. Behind these lodgers a wrinkled old crone is hutched up over her pipe and basking in the heat. Like many of her class, she is intolerant of cold because she cannot feed her bodily fire and produce natural warmth. If you fill in the details, it is not a pleasing picture. Look back. Long, long ago, 20 years, 30, 40 in some cases, numbers of these women came here or to a neighbouring house as girls. And now, look forward. You can see them all going to the workhouse or the hospital gate. That is their well-nigh inevitable end, unless they meet a worse fate. They will not, they cannot, rise to a higher level. One other kind of lodging house looms large in some parts of London, and that is the establishment for couples. The difference between a place of this class and one for men or women only lies solely in the sleeping accommodation. There is more privacy in the former, though not much in some cases, for the cubicles are like stable stalls. In general, however, they are similar, only smaller, to those boxed-off spaces which the coffee shop keeper dignifies with the name of bedrooms. In these places, as in most other doss houses, no questions are asked and no names taken. A man or woman may live in a fourpenny hotel for years, and yet be known to the deputy by the number of his or her bed. The majority of the lodgers in hotels for the poor, too, are casuals, not regulars, while one man has had the same kip for 40 years, and thousands have not changed their quarters for 5 or 10 years or longer. Numbers of men and women do not stop many days anywhere. One week a dosser may be in the Borough, the next in Spitalfields, the next in St. Clement's, Notting Hill, so that some phases of life in cubicle houses are not so exceptional as the circumstances surrounding certain murders which have been committed in them have led many to assume. On the whole, Dosserland is a squalid, depressing region. Tragedy, then comedy, fitfully, then tragedy again. Such is life in it. Yet, if its people make the social reformer despair, who shall say that their environment is not better now than ever it was? Of a truth, since the County Council obtained control of lodging houses, the improvement in them has been remarkable. The inspectors not only prevent overcrowding, but insist on cleanliness. No more sheet changing once a month, ventilation and other sanitary requirements. And as a result, the dosser now enjoys a degree of comfort of which formerly he had only heard.